Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome back to Pasadena Jewish Temple and Center. Welcome for the first time if you haven't been here before. Wherever you're coming from, first time or 1,000th time. I can see some people in Zoom, I think, have been here 1,000 times. Really delighted to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us to celebrate Shabbat. We're going to start that in just a second, but I'm so glad you're here. I want to say that if you're with us on Zoom, there is a downloadable Siddur. I'll be calling page numbers from this book, the Siddur Sim Shalom, for Shabbat and holidays. That's the right one. And if you're on Zoom, you can download that. If you're not on Zoom, God bless you. Play along and feel free to sing. And one thing I want to say is this is a singing community, my own voice notwithstanding. If you're looking for Cantor Ruth, she's fine. She's taking a vacation right now. She will be back next week. So thank you for indulging me in my voice. If you sing really loudly wherever you are, you can hear less of me. So please join us as we're going to sing a song here in a minute. We're going to start, as we usually do, on page 13, talking about the angels that usher us in peace through Shabbat. Shalom Aleichem, page 13. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bahuni Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzechem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hey, da 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 Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech, Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And just as we raise the sound in our space, wherever we are tonight, we also raise in the light on Shabbat. You can see we have some Shabbat candles lit all here already because we started a little bit after dark tonight. So, but I do want to honor that they're there. So we're going to go ahead and say the blessing over our Shabbat candles in just a second. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu, lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Good Shabbos, everybody. What a week, huh? I think I could say that, at least for everybody here in Southern California. We don't know what the rules are, but we know there are rules, and there are lots of them, and more every day. And it's been a week to struggle through, verily. I've noticed a change in people's moods. I've noticed a change in people's energy levels and anxiety levels. And thank God we have Friday nights where we could start to just lift up from that, put our noses above the water for just a second, breathe in, And we do that by just consciously letting go of the week that was. We'll get back there. Don't worry about it. We will we'll get back into the struggle. And more about that later. But for right now, we climb a ladder of psalm and song that is Kabbalat Shabbat. We start on page 15, L'chuna Ranana, which means get up, y'all, and sing uh, in the language of my people. So, L'chuna Ranana, page 15. L'chuna Ranana, l'Adonai. Naria letzo ishenu nekad mafanav betoda bizmiro naria lo kiel gadol Adonai melagado. Arbaim Shana Akut Bado Vaomer Am Toe Levavhem Vahem Lo Yadu Derachai Asher Nishbati Ve'api Im Yevon El Menuchati. Page 16. Hi da da da, hi da da da, hi da 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 da, hi da da da, hi da da da, hi da da da, hi da 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 da, hi da 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 da, hi da 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 da, hi da 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 da. Shiru Ladonai, Shir Chadash, Shiru Ladonai, Kol Haaretz, Shiru Ladonai, Baruch Shemo, Basru Meyom Leyom, Yeshuato, Zachru V'Goyim, Kevodo Bechol Ha'amim, Miklotav Ki Gadol Adonai, Hulal Meod, Norahum, Al Kol Elohim Hashem, Yadai, 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 Before we jump to Lachadodi, I want to take uh, a few moments and give you a little privacy. We have a few more pages of Psalms here, 17, 18, 19, so on. If you have a Siddur with you, take a look at the following Psalms. Just dig into the words. We'll have a little bit of soft music in the background, but I want you to feel like you have permission to read these texts all by yourself. Not just because I can't catch my breath, because I can't sing as well as Cantor Ruth, but because these were written as poems, not just songs, but a meditation of a person who had an encounter with God and did his best to write down what that experience was like in his own limited human language. So take a moment to look through the poetry of the Psalms, what the poet, often thought of as David, was trying to capture in that moment, and see if you can find the passage, the sentence, or even the word that you needed to hear tonight. And we'll get back together in a few moments for Lahadodi. Before we go on, the piece that always captures my attention is at the top of page 18. Shir Ladanai Shir Chadash, Kineflot Asa, Hoshia Lo Yaminu, Zurokocho. Sing to Adonai a new song, for God has worked wonders. God's might has been triumphant, revealing supreme power to all. God has remembered God's steadfast love and faithfulness to Beit Israel, to the house of those who struggle for God. I'll now invite you to take a look at page 21. Page 21. Our sages of Sfat from a few hundred years ago um, decided to interject into these traditional psalms a song of their own composition. Uh, in fact, let's see, you can see who wrote it. Shlomo Halevi Alkabetz, the first letters of the various of the stanzas spell out his name, Shin Lamed Mem He Shlomo. So he signed his work. But this is all about welcoming in Shabbat uh, as an honored guest, as a queen, as a bride, but not at arm's length. The title is Lecha Dodi, where we say, "Come, my beloved." This is Shabbat is something we revere, but Shabbat is something that we also know intimately. And it starts at the top of page 21. Page 21. There'll be a few different tunes for you to try out, but please sing along with me as best you can. Lecha Dodi likrat kala yababai 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 Shabbat nekavela Lecha Dodi likrat kala yababai yababai yadadadadai Shabbat nekabela shamo vezachor bedibor echad ishmianu el hameyuhad Adonai echad ushmo echad leshem ultiferet Veritila likrat Shabbat lehu v'necha ki mekor haberacha merosh mikedem nesucha סוף מעשה במחשבה תהילה לך דודי לקראת קלה יבביי 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 בני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת קלה ידדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה מקדש מלך עיר מלוכה ומצאי מתוך כפיך רב לך שבט בעמך בך והוא יחמו עלייך חמלה התנערי מעפר קומי לבשי בגדי תפארתך עמי על יד בן ישי בית הלחמי קרבה אל נפשי קלה לך דורי לקראת קלה ידדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה לך דורי לקראת קלה בני שבת נקבלה התעוררי התעוררי כי בעורך קומי אורי 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 שיר דברי ובור אדוני עלייך נגלה לך דורי לקראת קלה ידדה 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 בני שבת נקבלה דורי לקראת קלה יבביי 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 בני שבת נקבלה לך דורי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דורי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה לא תבושי ולא תקמי מה תשתוכחי ומה תחמי בך יחסו אני עמי ונמתה עירלתי לה והיו למשי סוף שועסייך ורחקו קומם עלייך וסיס עלייך אלוהייך תמסוס התן על קלה לך דורי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה ימין ושמאל תפרוצי ואת אדוני תריצי היריש פן פרצי ונשמחה ונגינה הולך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה הולך דודי לקראת קלה פני שבת נקבלה בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה Panei Shabbat, Panei Shabbat, Nekabelo. If you're standing, you may be seated. I'm going to call on somebody from the Zoom audience. Who's it going to be? I think it's going to be Tova. So we have this wonderful psalm that we conclude Kabbalat Shabbat with. Let's see, what page is that on? I think it's on page 23. Page 23. It's a psalm especially designated for Shabbat. It's on page 23. And this week it's going to be led by our own Tova Rosenbaum. Take it away, Tova.
ליום השבת, שוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, שוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. להגיד בבוקר חסדך, ואמונתך בלילות, עלי עשור ועלי נבל, עלי היום וכינור, מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. כי שימחתני אדוני, רפוא עליך, במעשה ידך, במעשה ידך, הענק. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון. מה גלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך, מה גלו מעשיך אדוני, מאוד עמקו מחשבותיך. מזמור שיר ליום השבת, טוב להודות לאדוני, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך עליון, ולזמר לשמך
Yefé me'od, beautiful. Thank you, Tova. I'm going to take a few moments just to teach a little bit of Torah out of this week's Torah portion, if I may, before we continue with our evening prayers and Mariv. So, one thing that kind of blew my mind when I learned about it. So you might want to sit down for this one. Adam, the first person, or I is first person. No, Adam Harishon, the first person in the Torah. Not a Jew. He was not Jewish. Which, that makes sense because he was the first of anybody, right? And there were other people who came along later. And among the different nations, this one person, his name was Avram, made a connection, a special connection with God that would apply not just to him, but to his family and to all of his descendants. And then those descendants would become a unique people. Fun fact, Avram, later known as Avraham Avinu, also not a Jew. just bear with me. You could say the same for Yitzhak, his son. You could say the same for Yaakov, his son, although he had a couple of different names. And you could even say that Moses was not a Jew. And I mean this in the strictest etymological sense, of course. We as Jews do feel connected to these people going all the way back to Avraham. We feel the common humanity going all the way back to Adam HaRishon. But the name Jew doesn't come along until way later, until most of the books of the Tanakh are sealed. In fact, the first reference to a word that would later become a word that would later become a word that would become Jew or Jewish, we see, I think the earliest example is in the book of Esther, where Mordechai, a couple chapters in, Mordechai is called Ish Yehudi. He is a man of Yehudah, a man of a particular tribe or maybe a particular place. And later this place, which is designated by the Roman Empire as Judea, and the people there, Judeans, because they don't have J's in Latin, I checked. And then later on in Old French, it becomes Yua, and then because in the Germanic languages, the I that represented that is a J, and somebody started pronouncing the hard J's, and then we became Jews. So we weren't called Jews until way into our history. We'd been a people for 1,000 years plus before we took this name of a place named after the tribe of Yehuda, and it doesn't come into play until the book of Esther, which is very late in the timeline of the Tanakh. For most of our story, we were called B'nai Yisrael. We were called after Yisrael, which is a name that Yaakov adopts. And I want to not lose sight of who we are. I want us to not lose sight of what our name means. And you could say, Rabbi, you're just playing with language here. Of course, Abraham was a Jew. Of course, Isaac was a Jew. And maybe even Adam, who knows? And you can ask, as Shakespeare did, what's in a name? A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. What does it matter if we're a Jew or a Bat Yisrael or a Ben Yisrael? And I'd like to say that it matters quite a lot, actually. It matters quite a lot what name you call yourself. And you might think it matters even more what name your children, or maybe not your biological children, but future generations of your people will be called. In our Torah portion this week is when Yaakov, who's coming back from kind of a long trip, he's been gone for about 20 years, beating a fraud rap, one might say. And he struggles with this duplicity that kicks him out of his land, of stealing his brother's birthright and running for his life. And then through some honest work and some, people might say, trickery with the whole striped sheep thing, he becomes a very wealthy man, but time has come to face up to his brother. And when he does, he spends the night before meeting his brother for the first time in 20 odd years, and he struggles. It says that he meets an ish, a man. That's all it really says. It says this man struggles with him. And there's something off about this man. Apparently, he doesn't like daylight. He struggles with Jacob all night, and they're in a deadlock. They're in a stalemate. This ish even throws a dirty punch and wrenches his hip at the socket, and that's why we don't eat sciatic nerve. But at the very end of this struggle, this being gives Yaakov a new name. He calls him Yisrael. And rather, he says, your name will be called Yisrael. It sort of presages or prophesies a name that God reaches out to Yaakov and says, your name is now Yisrael, just like that wrestler said, which means one who struggles with men and with the divine, and is not defeated. You are a wrestler with God, which sounds violent, which sounds, I don't know, borderline disrespectful when you think of what other faiths call themselves. This idea of struggling with the divine seems a little bit untoward. Uh, Later iterations of the Abrahamic faiths in Christianity comes from the word Christ, which was not actually his last name. That was a job title. That was an honorific for the Greek of anointed one, which is a translation of the Hebrew Moshiach. And so the people who followed that called themselves Christians. They were the people who assented to the anointed nature of this leader. They're people who followed an idea. And others of our brethren and sistren, I guess is the word, um, later called themselves Muslims, those who submit to the will of God. And I'm not picking a fight with either of these groups. I think these are powerful ideas that are very compelling to lots of people. In the comparison, do you feel more motivated to be an assenter, a believer in an idea, one who submits to the will of the all-powerful, or one who struggles with the all-powerful? And what does that say about you? What does that say about your children? For all of the Torah, after the story of Yaakov, from the time we are in Egypt until the time we get to the promised land, and so on, we're never called Jacob's kids. We're never called by a piece of geography or a particular person. We're called B'nai Yisrael, the children of the one who struggles with God. And you could look at children a couple of different ways. You could be those who are the offspring of this, just the genetic connection to the struggle, or the children or inheritors of this struggle, those who carry on that legacy, who pass on and pay forward that legacy. And so, for most of our story, as it was written down in most of our scriptures, we are reminded over and over again that we are the inheritors of that struggle. We are defined not by the straight path that we walk. We are not defined by how low we can go in humility, although that is a nice quality. We're defined by our struggle. We are defined by whom we fight, just as we are defined by those for whom we fight, by what we fight for. And yes, we do fight. We do fight with God over and over, but always in the name of God's own highest ideals. When Moses fights with God, when Abraham fights with God, when people today fight with God, the fight is, why aren't you as just as I thought you were? Why do I live this life that I live? But that's okay, because I think part of the struggle is that we struggle with understanding how we can live in a better world. And that's part of the fight too. Yes, we fight with God. Yes, we certainly fight with each other. And all of our Talmud is basically a record of those arguments. But we also fight for God. And we also fight for each other. And we also fight for those who have no champion. That is our inheritance. That is the inheritance we choose to pass. In years to come, in generations to come, in centuries to come, people will look at us today and ask, what did they fight about? But they will revere, what did we fight for? So, this is our chance to lay down the struggle for 25 hours of Shabbat. And we get that chance every single week. But when it's time to go to work, pick your battles. Pick what you fight for. Don't fight for petty things. Don't fight for mean things. As Hillel says, you should fight for yourself, but don't fight only for yourself. Because years, generations, centuries from now, we have to answer the question, for what struggle would we choose to be known? Shabbat Shalom, and thank you once again for joining us here at PJTC. We're going to continue with our evening prayer service with Mariv on page 28. We're back in our prayer book. We start with our call to prayer, the Barhu, and we rise for this one. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Adonai. Umavir yom uvevi laila, umavdil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzavot shamo, el chai v'kayam, tamid yimlok aleinu le'olam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, hamari baravim. You may be seated. We turn to page 29. Page 29, we bless God for the light that comes up and the light that goes down. And now we bless God for the constancy of God's love. Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Ahavta, Torah u'mitzvot, Chukim u'mishpatim, Otanu limadeta. Al ken Adonai Eloheinu, V'shogvenu komenu, Nasiach bechukecha. Yem anu, v'nisma divrei Torotecha, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגה יומם ולילה, יומם ולילה, ובטח תעשה ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל. Shema Yisrael Adonai Elohim Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. And continue at your own pace at the bottom of page 30, and we'll get back together in just a moment. כי השמיים על הארץ. Tova is going to lead us at the top of page 31, page 31.
ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור, דבר אל בני ישראל ואמרת להם, ועשו להם ציצית על כנפי בגדיהם לדורותם, ונתנו על ציצית הכנף פתיל תכלת, והיה לכם לציצית, וראיתם אותו, וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני, ועשיתם אותם, ולא תטורו אחרי לבבכם ואחרי עיניכם, אשר אתם זונים אחריהם, למען תזכרו, ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת.
אמת ומלכות וקיים עלינו. We continue on page 32, page 32. Having blessed God for light, having blessed God for God's constant love, we bless God for redeeming us from narrow places. In this particular blessing, we quote the song at the sea, this song that we sang in spontaneous joy after being rescued from servitude in Egypt, where we asked, who is like you among all who are worshipped? Mi chamocha is at the middle of page 32. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh nora, tehilot osef elem mahutecha. ראו עיניך בוקע הים לפני משה, זה לי אנו ואמרו, זה לי אנו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. Together. מקיף אדוני את יעקב ולא מיד חזק ממנו. ברוך אתה אדוני גל ישראל. Finally, we bless God, for whom it is God's nature to shelter us with peace. Help us, Adonai, to lie down in peace and awaken us again to life. Hashkivenu on page 33. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom vehamidenu malkeinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom vehamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Ushmor tzedenu uvoenu lechaim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom vehamidenu malkeinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom vehamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Shalom, 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 shalom. Ufros aleinu sukat shlomecha. Baruch atah Adonai הפורש סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים. Page 34. ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. ביי 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 ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם, כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השבת השמיים ואת הארץ, וביום השביעי שבת וינפש. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, במה דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי, בהייכון וביומכון, ובחיי דכל בית ישראל, בעגלה בעגלה, ובזמן קריב, ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ולעולמי עלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח, ויתפאר ויתרומם וינשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי דקודשה בריחו, לילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, דמירן ועלמה, ויאמרו amen. We rise for the private Amidah for Shabbat evening. If you want to use the traditional words on the page, they're on page 35b, page 35b. You can also pray whatever is in your heart this evening. This is a silent prayer, so take your time, pray your prayer. When you're finished praying, you may be seated, and we'll get back together in a few moments. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל kol Yisrael. Vimru, Vimru, Amen. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom. Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. We conclude this part of our service with the Kaddish Shalem on page 48. Page 48. Yikra v'ikra shemei rabba, ve'alma divra kirte v'yamlich malchute, b'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayedecho beit Yisrael, b'agalav v'zman kari v'imeru, amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach, le'olam olam me'al maya, yitbarach, yitbarach, v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei rekudsha, brichu, Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tush b'chata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'yimeru, amen. Tika ba'asor hon v'ad hon dekol Yisrael, kodma v'hon devishmaya v'yimeru, amen. Yehi shlam rabba min shemaya, v'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'yimeru, amen. Ose shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, v'yimeru. Amen. I'll ask you to please rise for Aleinu. We begin to end our service with Aleinu on page 51. Page 51, please rise. Aleinu לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי הארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. כי המלכות שלך היא ולמעט תמלוך בכבוד, ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, ונאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו, ושמו, ושמו אחד. You may be seated. Before we end our service, we always take a moment to remember those who are no longer with us. In the coming week here at PJTC, we are marking the yard site, and that is the anniversary of the passing of Bertha Nager, Catherine Walter, David Spira, Donald Englehart, Earl Carlson, Ernest Robinson, Ava Gold, Frederick Rakelin, Israel Nell, James Martin, Jules Gerber, Lena Yates, Lillian Splaver, Max Klein, Meyer Weinberg, Mildred Gould, Milton Goldberg, Morris Barak, Paul Van Dellen, Ronnie Brewert, and Theodore Marks. We also take a moment to mourn the loss of Marcos Kvyat Nudel, father of Judy Kvyat Balian, wife of Steve Balian, and grandfather of Tito, grandfather Tito, that was his grandpa name, to Jacob Shane and Naomi Balian. Marcos passed away this past Sunday, November 29th, in Mexico City, and a funeral and shiva took place there at Temple Bethel in Mexico City. We pray that Marcos's memory always be a blessing. Hamakom Yinachem. May God comfort and strengthen that family at this time. If you have another name that you'd like to lift up in honor at this time, hold their name in your heart or speak it out loud wherever you are. And if you are in mourning for anyone or observing a yard site, please rise for the Kaddish Tome, the Mourner's Kaddish, on page 52. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. Balma divra kirute v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael ba'agala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehe shmei rabba mevorach leolam ulalmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei dekudsha brihu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. If you're standing, you may be seated, and all may lend me your ears for a few brief but meaningful announcements. So what is coming up in the coming week? It says, it's all news to me as if it is to you. So now, if it's news to you, you should really read your emails, because we send out some great emails, I promise you. They're amazing, and they have links to all sorts of great stuff on Zoom, because that's where we're doing everything these days. So we have ongoing things on Zoom, which is on every Sunday. Kadima and USY, these are two youth groups, have a book club that meets on Sundays. We have meditation groups that meet on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Saturdays. And every Wednesday, we have a Pirkei Avot discussion in the evening. Those are ongoing things. Some special stuff, some unique stuff that I want to make sure you know about that's coming up in the next week. This Sunday, we're kicking off this great Judaism in the Home program. There's going to be all sorts of wonderful resources coming out of PJTC, educational resources, actual things you could touch that you could pick up. For example, we're having a Hanukkah kit. See what I did? It's like a Hanukkah kit, but you jam them together. It's a Hanukkah kit. You can pick up your Hanukkah kit at 11 a.m. this Sunday. We're having a Hanukkah kit drive-through to pick those up. So if you don't know what that is, read your email or call the office, and we'll clue you in. Everybody who wants a Hanukkah kit should have a Hanukkah kit. So that's happening Sunday at 11 o'clock. Sunday at 3 o'clock, the Jewish Federation is having its 13th annual Festival of Music. That's the Jewish Federation of the San Gabriel Valley. That's Sunday, 3 p.m. On Monday, you should know that this week we are having both Men's Club and Sisterhood meetings simultaneously at 7:30 p.m. On Monday. On Tuesday, the 8th at 7 p.m., the Jewish Book Festival continues with author Jonathan Kaufman discussing his books, The Last Kings of Shanghai. Very cool. On Thursday, it is the first night of Hanukkah, y'all, and the Judaism in the Home virtual session is happening, sharing Hanukkah and Tzedakah traditions. So you can light your candles, you can get together with us and learn about these traditions of Hanukkah and also Tzedakah during Hanukkah. So check that out. That's this Thursday. And on Friday, the 11th, PJTC Brings in the Light. We're asking people to post a photo of your family with a Hanukkah on social media and answer the question. This is a special social media challenge. So on Thursday night, when you light your stuff, take pictures of it. Then on Friday, post a photo of your family with your Hanukkah and answer the question, How are you bringing light to those around you this holiday season? So it's a great thing to do. Would love to hear people's answers. I'll put up one of my own, I hope. But that's just another example of how are we increasing the light? Who are we struggling for this holiday season? I just want to end on a note of gratitude. Thank you all so much for joining us here at PJTC. If you can't get enough of Shabbat stuff here at PJTC, we will be back tomorrow morning at 9:30. You're all invited wherever you are coming from tonight. You're in the right place. And in just a moment, we're going to sing our way out. But I want to thank you all for supporting these services, especially during Cantor Ruth's vacation. Her job has never been more secure. So thank you so much for being with us. We're going to sing what we usually sing on Friday nights, and it always sounds better if you stand up while you're singing it. We're going to sing Odivo Shalom, and then we'll hang around for Kiddush. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu, Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam Shalom. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam Shalom. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu. Od Yavo Shalom Aleinu ve'al kulam. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Shalom, shalom. Salam Aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Salam, shalom. Good Shabbos, everybody. If you want, stick around for Kiddush. All right, is my microphone still on? Excellent. So, if you have a celebratory beverage of your choice, wine is good, grape juice is good, but whatever floats your boat, please join me. ויערב ויבוקר יום השישי, ויהורו השמיים והארץ וכל צבאם, ויהל אלוהים ביום השביעי מלאכתו אשר עשה, וישבות ביום השביעי מכל מלאכתו אשר עשה. ויברך אלוהים את יום השביעי, ויקדש אותו, כי בו שבת מכל מלאכתו אשר ברא אלוהים לעשות. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר קידשנו במצוותיו ורצה בנו, ושבת קודשו באהבה רצון הנהי לנו זיכרון למעשה וראשית, כי הוא יום תהילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים, כי בנו בהרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנהלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת. If you want to wash along with me, or I'll be thinking about you when I do it. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu al netilat yadayim. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Good Shabbos, everybody. Thank you for joining us here at